Hi, and welcome back to Save Me from AP. I'll be showing you the first of our one-page review sheets. If you've watched my video on study skills, then you know that I'm of only having one page of notes to study for the test. Now, this one page of notes isn't going to replace the notes that you took from reading your textbook or the ones that you took from listening to your teacher. This is a one page to just kind of summarize everything and help you to organize your thoughts. Now, if you haven't taken notes from the textbook and you haven't been listening to the teacher and it's the night before the test, then this one page might actually get you through. So let's just sort of dive right in. And in reading through the first unit, I decided that there were sort of 6 things we need to know and different amounts of information for each. So I'm going to organize my review sheet this way. I think we have 2 big concepts to talk about, 2 medium-sized concepts, and 2 small concepts. And we're going to title them Basic Chemistry. There's sort of a lot you need to know. We need to know about proteins because they do everything. And I'll tell you what I mean about that. There are carbs, lipids, nucleic acids, and steroids. All right, so let's dive right in first to chemistry. I'm going to expand the chemistry section so that you can see my writing a little better. But I promise you, I have written all of this on one page of printer paper, and I think you can fit it all on one page too without expanding it. So for chemistry, we need to know about carbon. Carbon forms the basis for life on Earth anyway. And the reason it's so versatile and so important to life is because it can make bonds with 4 covalent bonds with 4 other chemicals. So it looks like this. Carbon bound to 4 things. The only other element that can really do this is silicon, and that's why scientists think maybe it would form life somewhere else. We are carbon-based, and we call that organic life. Right? Organic means carbon-based in science, not organic food, but carbon-based. All right. That's really all you need to know about carbon, except that, all these molecules that we talked about are going to have carbons in them. If you want to memorize all the carbon side chains, go for it. But if you haven't studied up until this point, that's not really worth your time. All right. The rest of the chapter on chemistry was really about water. The most important property of water is that it is polar. Polar means that it's basically shaped in a way such that it keeps part of its charges. So let's talk about what that means. If you look at the periodic table, oxygen wants a -2 charge and hydrogen wants a +1. So water covalently bonds 2 hydrogens or 2 +1s with 1 -2 on the oxygen, and it's now a stable molecule, except that because the hydrogens aren't linear, right? Instead, they kind of look like Mickey Mouse ears, or they're triangle shaped. The hydrogens keep part. This little lowercase delta here means partial charge in science. The hydrogens keep part of their positive charge, and the oxygen keeps part of its -2 charge. And so the molecule really still kind of has a charge, which means that instead of being happy, it still wants to interact with stuff. So polar means keeps partial charge. Because it is polar, it makes what is called hydrogen bonds. You can kind of guess what those are, right? These are weak bonds that happen between molecules, so the hydrogen on this water will weakly bond with the oxygen of another water or, any other negatively charged molecule. This makes water molecules stick together. So when we say water is sticky, that's what we mean. When water sticks together, it's called cohesion. And water also sticks to other charged or polar molecules, and this is called adhesion. All right, so then let's just go through our laundry list of properties of water. All of the properties of water are the result of water being polar and having the ability to form hydrogen bonds. The first one you need to know is that ice floats. Other solids don't float, they sink because solids by nature are more dense than liquids. So if you put a solid in its corresponding liquid, it should sink. But ice floats. Why? Because the hydrogen bonds sort of snap out and make the ice less dense. So hydrogen bonds spread the molecules out. This is important to life on Earth because now all creatures that live in water can sort of insulate themselves under the ice when it gets too cold. The next property is surface tension. This is how water droplets form, right? Why is water a droplet instead of all the water molecules just spreading out? It's because the water molecules stick together to form a cohesive droplet. That's surface tension. The next is a high specific heat. This means that water cools as it evaporates. And this is important both for the environment and also for you because this is what sweat does. Water is the universal solvent. Because it is polar and readily available, there are other polar molecules, but water is very common and it is polar, meaning so it can dissolve anything that has a charge or is polar. Can't dissolve anything without a charge, but most things have a charge. Any polar or charged molecule. And the last property you need to know is transpiration. Transpiration is basically how blood flows through a plant. Yes, plants have quote unquote blood. It's not like human blood, but they don't have a heart to pump that blood. So how does the blood move through the plant? It does this through evaporation. Imagine all the water molecules linked together in a chain, and the sun is beating on the leaves. The leaves have these pores that open, and the water molecules evaporate out. Well, since all the water molecules are linked in a chain, that evaporation is going to pull the chain upward, and now we have blood or water moving up the plant. Up the plant by evaporation. All right, so I think that is all that we need to know about general chemistry. Let's move on to proteins. Feel free to pause this if you didn't get all those notes, but I do think this note sheet is going to be very valuable to you for the Unit 1 test. All right, let's talk about proteins. Proteins do everything. Okay, they are made of something called an amino acid, and they are bound together by a peptide bond. Let's draw an amino acid here. Amino acids have an amine, NH2, and a carboxy, or carboxylic acid, which is why it's an amino acid. And in the middle, they have something called an R group, which is basically like the X in algebra, and it varies. Every amino acid has a different one. This R group gives the amino acid its properties, so it would make it charged or hydrophobic or bent, right? Proteins are built and taken apart by dehydration and hydrolysis. So let's talk about that. Dehydration builds proteins. It adds these peptide bonds. And this is called anabolism. Hydrolysis, that's a Y, breaks the protein, and that is called catabolism. The shape of a protein tells its function. Proteins are balled up into, I don't know, I guess balls. Shape is function, and when you change the shape of the protein, you change the function. You can turn it on and turn it off, or you can give it a different function sometimes. All right, so there are 4 levels of structure you need to know. The primary structure is the linear amino acid sequence. The secondary is folds. There are 2, the alpha helix, which, looks like a helix, and the beta sheet, which is more like a zigzag. Then the alpha helix and helices, I guess, and beta sheets interact with each other to make the tertiary structure, which is basically a balled up protein. And the quaternary structure is when more than one protein binds together. So more than one. We call this dimer if it's 2, or a polymer if it's many. You can also change the shape of a protein by putting a phosphate on it. Phosphates have a negative charge, and they turn the protein on or off by changing its shape. The last thing that you need to know about proteins in general is that they are involved in signaling. So they orchestrate all of the pathways in your cells that tell your cells what to do or respond to hormones or things like that. How your cells respond to your environment. And there's something called feedback inhibition, where the end of the pathway turns it off. What does that mean? Let's say that I wanted my signaling pathway to make, I don't know, a hormone, right? And when I get enough of that hormone, I want it to stop. So the hormone would inhibit the signaling pathway from making more hormone. That makes sense. All right, so I've left a space over here intentionally for enzymes. Enzymes are proteins, in case you didn't know. And since enzymes are proteins, proteins can be denatured, which means you can turn them linear, go back to that primary structure, and you do this with acid or heat. Obviously, this destroys the function of the protein. Enzymes have a very important role. They speed up reactions. They do this by helping the reactants find each other and by bending them to react. Okay, let's draw the enzyme graph. So here's how a normal reaction happens. You have this is energy over here. You have two reactants who want to react. They need to get over a hump of energy, and then they form a more stable product. When an enzyme is around, though, they're still at the same starting energy, and they're still at the same ending energy, but the amount of energy it takes to react is decreased. All right, that is all you need to know about proteins. Since this video is getting a little long, I'm going to pause here and make a part 2 video where I explain the second half of this sheet. So I'll see you there.